Hey everybody, Tony D and Little Joan here with a screenwriter's tip. And it is really just a writing tip in general. So I found that recently I haven't had the time to do a lot of actual writing. I've been busy with the commercial and the channel and other things in my life. So, and I'm sure we've all had those moments. So what do you do? How do you make writing happen when you don't even have time to actually do it? Well, the way I do it is while I'm doing other things, I'm thinking about the scenes I want to write. So then later, when I sit down to write them, I've run them through my head a few times. They're a lot easier to write. Okay? So I'm working on book 7 of the Pineys. And I have a scene, which is a flashback scene, by the way, of Hemingway when he was a teenager. And so during the course of my day, like running errands and doing stuff, I'm thinking about the scene and how it's going to play out, who's going to be in it, and, the great contrast you can do with a flashback scene like that. Because, I have 6 books prior to that, which established the character. And now I'm going back into his past and having like actual scenes in his past that will foreshadow what's to come in funny ways, right? So it's a little bit like when Homer in The Simpsons might talk about his luxurious hair, right? And that's funny because we all know he's going to go bald. Or, you can pretty much do it with just about any character. I mean, the characters on The Big Bang Theory, or at least Sheldon, was strong enough that they decided to do a spinoff of just Sheldon, young Sheldon, and pretty much do the same thing with a kid that they did on the show with Sheldon, right? Sheldon was like super smart, but not really a, shall we say, a guy who was piped in to how humans actually interact. So the reason you do that is it's a chance to work out the kinks in your own mind. Now, typically when I'm writing a scene in my brain, I'm thinking about it as a scene in a movie, right? So I may not have the actors in mind. A lot of times I put myself in the roles, obviously. The commercial I just shot with Hemingway, I was thinking about for weeks because I was trying to figure out how I could shoot it, how I could make it look good, and not. At one point, I was talking with a friend of mine who's a cinematographer, and we were talking about maybe spending, some money on a special effects guy to come in and actually put a CGI like demon in for a couple of seconds. Devil, excuse me. And actually put that in the commercial. Maybe for next year or maybe, down the road. It was almost too much to do. Sometimes you just get kind of inspired. So, I've been talking and talking in my own head about, oh yeah, you got to do that commercial. You got to do that commercial. I'd actually started thinking about it 2 years ago. And, I said, well, if I'm going to do it this year, I have to do it now. I have to get the commercial up for Halloween because that's the best time to sell the Pineys. So I just kind of went for it one Saturday, but I had the commercial running in my head the whole time. So all I really needed was to get all the props. I couldn't find my air rifle, which was a problem, and my machete. So I had to kind of search 2 houses to find it. And of course, they were in my basement. I just put them in a dumb spot. You put something in a spot that you think, oh, I'll remember this, and then you totally do not. But I got the commercial shot, and then, then editing it was no big deal. And I even got my other videos done that day. So it was a pretty productive day. But I wouldn't have been able to do that scene so quickly and easily if I hadn't mapped it out in my own brain many, many times. I even had alternate takes where I said a little more and a little less, because I also knew it had to be about 30 seconds long. I could tweak it a couple of seconds here and there. I could make the card at the end longer, shorter, depending on what I needed it. But I did want to be able to at least say thepineys.com, which I had just enough time to do. I'm going to put little Joan down. She's squirming. So what I'm trying to say is the benefit of kind of grinding through it in your own brain is a benefit. Because doing the same thing with the Pineys book, I was able to just sort of sit right down and get further going. Because I think a lot of times when you sit down to write things, you're kind of like, okay, now I'm stuck. Well, you're not really stuck. You're thinking. You're thinking about the scene and how it should go. And then you're trying a few things, or you're reading the dialogue aloud, which I always recommend. And you're kind of working it out by doing the workout in your own brain, sort of in the car. Like sometimes I'll do that in the car, right? I'll play music that goes along with the Pineys, or I'll think about scenes, and maybe I'll even say the dialogue aloud. I'm alone in the car. Who cares? Reading the dialogue is really helpful because sometimes you can come up with dialogue you think is very clever, but it's actually a little clunky, and reading it aloud, or saying it aloud, or delivering it aloud, you can sometimes discover something about that. You can sometimes discover about the delivery of it. You can explore that just verbally on your own, even if you're not, built to play the character you're writing about. And gives you something to do in the car. Quite frankly, if you got to do stuff in the car, you got to run a bunch of errands or whatever. But when I finally do sit down to write these scenes, it tends to go a little faster because I go, oh yeah, I already worked this scene out. Yeah, I wanted to do this. And then I can sort of grind through it and then go back and make sure the scene jives with the other scenes, and then just move forward. It's a value, and it's a way to kind of make the time you do have to write more productive. So now you can't always do that. It kind of depends upon your job or what you're doing. I mean, obviously, if you have a job that requires some amount of mental capacity, it's going to be really tough to sit there and think about scenes you want to write about when you have to concentrate on, writing a report for an accountant firm, or, if you're working on a legal brief or whatever you're working on, you got to write a letter for your boss or something. But there's always lunch. There's always the drive to and from work. There's all kinds of time that you can steal and not waste. Instead of sitting in the car, if you're stuck in the car, you got an hour commute or whatever, you can waste it listening to music. And it is a waste if that's all you do every day, and it's kind of boring and you do that all the time. But you could be productive in your writing instead by sitting in the car and driving along and thinking to yourself, okay, what scene am I working on tonight when I get home and I only have about an hour to work on it? All right, I'm going to work on the such and such scene. Okay, who's in that? It's this character, this character, this character. And I'm trying to move that forward. What's a good line? And then you try out some lines in your head to see how they feel. You start shaking it out. And that way, and then you do it on the way home. It's definitely a benefit to do it. Now in the morning, you're trying to get the brain just working. But definitely on the way home, that's primo time. Because by the time you're driving home, even though you might be a little tired from working, your brain's awake. It might not be fully awake in the morning. In the morning, you might just be like, oh, I gotta go to work. But definitely on the way home, because you want to start warming things up. that's another thing too. Even if the scenes you're trying to work on in the car don't really go anywhere, at least at first, and they probably won't, it'll warm up your brain. Because if you don't do it, you're going to have to waste that time sitting in front of the keyboard struggling. So what you're doing is you're making the process more efficient. So when you're finally in front of the keyboard, you're more likely to write something. And especially in a screenplay, dialogue is very important. So working out that dialogue in the car can be a big help. And don't worry about people watching you. They'll just assume you're singing to the radio or something. If you're by yourself, it's no big deal. Obviously, if there's somebody else in the car, well, you're not going to be able to do it. But if you're by yourself, certainly, you can make good use of the time. Even if maybe you're just running an errand for work, or you're just sitting in the break room by yourself, whatever. These are all opportunities. You should see them as opportunities rather than wasting, say, time on your phone, just cruising the internet or whatever. Some days that's what you do, right? You check your email, maybe you got to check the dating sites or whatever you do. I check the dating sites sometimes. I scroll through Tinder. And it also depends upon your job, right now I'm working at the sort of gig where there's not a lot of mental stuff going on. So I got plenty of time to think about the scenes I'm writing. And so when I get home, boom, I'm ready to go. I'm already warmed up. I'm already thinking about the direction I'm going in. I've eliminated some of the more obvious scenes that I don't want to do, and I'm rearing to go. So what I'm saying is, make good use of your time. Even if it's only 10, 15-minute commute, it can be invaluable when you finally do sit down to write. And that is my screenwriting tip for today.